Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Hey everyone, welcome to Ask Rob and Rob, the show where you give us your marvellous questions that keep us going for over 400 episodes now. And it's easy to get your questions in, which is probably why we've been going for over 400 episodes. Rob, let's give everyone a quick reminder how they can get on the show.
Yep, one link is all you need, propertyhub.net/ask. If you go there, you can send us a voicemail, you can send us a written question for our Sunday Times column. It all starts at propertyhub.net/ask. And that is a simple instruction that Andy managed to follow.
Hi, Rob and Rob. It's Andy here. Hope you're well. That's a good weekend. So let's try and drop you a question based on a Telegraph article on the 4th of August, which is basically saying that Labour wants to increase the harshness of the rental reform bill by actually adding in the French harshness test with regard to removing tenants from your property if they act up, don't pay, etc. So I just want to understand what your opinion on this.
Andy, thank you for your question. So obviously the answer is we don't know, because no one has any insight into what Labour are actually going to do. They themselves probably don't know at the moment exactly what they're going to do. But I'll explain what the process will look like and where I think this will end up landing. So because the renters reform bill ended up failing, it ran out of parliamentary time before the election, they're going back to the beginning and bringing back a completely new bill from the start. It seemed for a while like what they might do was like push through the end of no-fault evictions quickly and do the rest later. No, it's all as it was before, all part of one big bill that's going to have to go through the parliamentary process. So a bill will be brought forward at some point from October onwards, and based on what we know, that's probably going to start off looking pretty much like the old one did. There's unlikely to be any surprises. But then it goes through a process of being debated in Parliament and going to committee and being debated and being amended, and in that process, different amendments can be put forward by all parties. What you'll probably see at that stage is suggestions like the one you're talking about coming up. And I'm not an expert in French eviction law, but I believe this is related to the idea that even if the tenant has definitely done X, Y, and Z wrong, if it would cause them excessive hardship, then they can stay anyway. That obviously is something that would make life very difficult for landlords. So you might see amendments like that being suggested. All kinds of things will probably be floating around at that time. But will something like that end up making it into the final version of the bill and ultimately becoming law? I think it's unlikely. I don't know. Maybe it will. We have no idea. But I think it's unlikely because ultimately, even if they would love to destroy the private rental sector completely, I'm not saying they would, but even if they would love to do that, they can't because there's nothing in its place. And if you do end up with a situation like in Scotland, where they've gone pretty draconian, nowhere near as far as what you're talking about, but they've gone pretty draconian, and as a result, supply is down, rents are up, no one's very happy, it doesn't end up reflecting very well on the politicians. So my bet, Andy, and this is only a guess, is that this is not the last we'll hear of that rumour, and there'll be many more rumours, but what will end up actually becoming law will be a lot more moderate.
So hopefully, Andy, and everyone listening, you're feeling a little more reassured right now. Let's hear what we got up next. This question is in from Tom.
Hi, Rob and Rob. This is Tom calling with a question for you. And first of all, my first question is, what is the record for the most amount of questions read out of Rob and Rob? I think I currently stand on 5, and this is potentially my 6th question that could be read out. I just wondered if that's a record for my own personal trophy cabinet or whether there's someone with more. But my actual property question for today is all about my strategy that I'm thinking of deploying. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I have quite a large sum of capital where I could potentially buy houses outright, initially not needing to have a mortgage. The idea behind this would be I'm able to buy them, spend a little bit of money on the refurb, and then ideally looking to keep them for capital growth, rental income by remortgaging them, ideally withdrawing a lot of the money that I've spent out of the property. My question is, if I was to buy a property, do it up and rent it out, when I come to remortgage, do the banks typically just look at the rental income you're receiving when they're assessing whether to give you a mortgage on that property? Or is it bigger than that? They will obviously look at my personal income, but is the main thing for their decision going to be that 1.25 over the mortgage payments being received in rental income? Thanks very much if you can help with that.
Tom, that's a lot of questions answered. I think we need to start charging soon. But let's keep this one as another freebie. And thank you for keep asking such great questions, because obviously it's the quality of your questions that get you on the show. And this is another great question that not only will help you, but hopefully a lot of other people listening as well. And the answer is, they'll look at a few different things. It's not just one. So when you're looking for a mortgage, what are they assessing? Well, first of all, they're going to assess the property itself. So is it worth the amount that you say it's worth? So they will base it on that. And the amount that they lend will be based on the value of that property. It will take other things into account, which I'll come on to. But as long as those boxes are ticked, it won't be on anything else except the value of your property. So if you're adding value to the property, then you would hopefully get yourself a nice mortgage on that property. And using leverage, as we talk about on the Property Podcast, is super powerful for those investing in the long term. So beyond the property's value, what else is taken into account? And you've already touched on it in your question, but yes, they will look at rental income. Now, if you've got an absolute banging rent on your property, it will not suddenly mean that even if your property is worth 200, because the rent is so strong in there, you can lend against 220. It is capped at its value. But if your rent is low and it doesn't meet the stress tests, then you may not be able to lend against the full 200. So it doesn't give you more, but it may give you less. So you need to make sure that your rents can meet the stress tests. Now, it will depend whether you're going for a 2-year product or a 5-year product. It will depend on the stress tests, and it's less stringent on the 5-year products. So if you're torn and the rent isn't too strong, maybe look at the 5 years. But normally, you will get the mortgage, and the rent needs to be 1.25 times the amount of your mortgage payment. So if your mortgage payment was, say, £100, to keep this nice and simple for myself, then the rent would need to be £125. So that's how it works. Finally, do they look at you, the individual? And again, the answer is yes. Not to add to the value, but it could stop you getting the mortgage. Because if you've got a bad credit record, and we talk about monitoring your credit record and how important that is as a property investor, or you have little to no income, it could go against you. If you've got poor credit, then the market is going to be really restricted and you might not be able to get a mortgage at all. There might be a few options, but there's severe restrictions there. If you have got low income, again, you are restricted, but there will be options out there. Now, the good news is you don't have to have a crazy big income to get a buy-to-let mortgage. More of the weighting is on the value and the rent. But in most cases, most lenders will want to see you have an income of around 25k. Varies lender to lender, that's the number that you see the most. So as long as you earn 25k or more, have clean credit, you'll be fine. So a long answer there, Tom, to hopefully help you, but everyone else listening. But the main thing is get the property right. If the property's right, the rent will be right, and just make sure your credit's where it needs to be and you've got a bit of an income and you'll be fine. But if you fall down in some of the areas, it doesn't mean no mortgage, it just means possibly restrictions. And now you've had 6 questions answered. The 7th, Tom, costs you a beer at least, or an ice cream, depending on how we're feeling.
So there you go. We have 2 more answers, and I think everyone has a new life goal to aspire to. I'm sure there'll be people coming for you, Tom. If you've had a question on the show before, get yourself over to propertyhub.net/ask and start seeing if you can chase Tom down. Thank you for listening. We'll be back on Thursday with another episode of the Property Podcast. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.